So thank you everybody for joining. I don't know, what month are we in now? September. So our September user group, we've not met since before the summer, so it's good to see everybody. We've got quite a few people presenting today. So we've got Jolie and Callum, who are both from ProvenWorks, and they're giving you a good old wave. And they are going to be talking to us about Simple Import and some address management tools and stuff, which are quite cool. So we're going to take a look at them. We've got Mark. Most of you know Mark Jones, but Mark's a Salesforce consultant, and he's going to be talking to us about Dreamforce, about anything that key takeaways, and also like the sessions we should watch on Salesforce+, because let's be honest, there's like too many to know what to watch. And then I'm going to be giving us a bit of a roundup on the winter release. Please don't ask me tons of questions, because do you know what? I've done just as much as like reading release notes, but there's some really cool stuff on there, and I've got some more stuff about where you can find out more and all of that. So hopefully we will be all good. In terms of timings, Jolie and Callum are up first. They're going to talk for about 35 minutes-ish. And then Mark and I have got 20 minutes each. We then have our very famous duck race. I'm going to say it's famous, but you know, it's pretty fun. With such a small group, everyone stands a good chance of winning. So, you know, what more can you want? And I've got some really cool prizes. So you may have noticed I have Ruth plushies. One of them is mine, but I do have a Ruth up for grabs, and I've got an Astro, and I've got Astro. He's going to come with a notebook, and I've got a mug. Probably throw a mug in with Ruth. I've got a mug and a nice little key ring, and we've also got, you know, stickers and other good stuff. So we will make sure they're available for you. So enough of me waffling on. Oh, sorry, I should say at the end. So we do a bi-weekly coffee chat on a Thursday at 4:30. And we thought it would be ideal to just run straight into coffee chat. So at 4:30, we're still doing our coffee chat for an hour. So if you want to stay on, join coffee chat. It's literally, we just sit and chat about all things Salesforce. Sometimes do like little demos of stuff, but generally it's chit chat. Often Salesforce related, sometimes not. Often people trying to convince each other that it's all right, it will eventually work for you, sometimes not. Talk about great products, you know, talk about people like ProvenWorks, and, you know, oh yeah, do we really like Callum and Jolie? Oh, don't know. We do, they're great. But yeah, if you want to stay on for that, please do. We may have some people who just join for coffee chat, but you don't have to stay on either. Appreciate people may have better places to be. But if you want to stay on, definitely I'll still be there. I know Yvonne will still be there. So great. Okay, I will now hand you over to the wonderful Jolie and Callum.
Hey everyone, how you doing? So this is the first time we're doing anything like this, so excuse me if I completely mess everything up. The first time I'm used to talking, and limiting me to 35 minutes may be an issue.
That's why Callum's here.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking 35 minutes. That's generous. Crikey.
Well, we knew that you two like to chat and you've got great stuff to show.
Well, yeah.
So.
Oh, you're too kind.
That's amazing. Yeah, so introduce ourselves. I'm Jolie. I've only been in Salesforce ecosystem since May this year, but working with ProvenWorks, and we're a company, we do a range of tools on the App Exchange. We've got one, address tools is our biggest mover, where it's address validation, address verification, standardization. We'll show you some of that in action on one of the other tools. Today we're going to talk about another tool called SimpleImport, which is a idiot-proof, easy to use data loader, SimpleImport. Being used by standard users and set up by admins, but it gives an on-rails experience for standard users, so that you can just literally drag and drop any spreadsheet, whether it's PSP or Excel, XLSX, whatever, drop them in and it'll import. Big use on this one I'm going to talk about today is for importing recurring donations, importing recurring payment schedules, things like that. Big use. We have a use case which we did with Mental Health UK, wasn't it, Callum? And they use it for the importing all the recurring donations, and it just saves everybody so much time, so much work, and it's just so stupidly simple to use. Even as a complete Salesforce novice, I managed to install it on my own and have it up and running within about half an hour. And I don't even know how to set up a Salesforce page. It's just a complete novice. So it's a really cool piece of equipment, really cool piece of tool. We've also got another tool for doing phone validation, for checking phone numbers against the telephone preference services. Just jumped off a call actually from a company. They'd had some hefty fines from the ICO, into tens of thousands of pounds for doing cold call telemarketing into companies. They were registered against the corporate telephone preference services, so you weren't supposed to call company called somebody kicked up a stink and then they got fined thousands of pounds. Something like that, for sake of £1,200 a year, they could have saved themselves a whole lot of hassle. So those are the three main tools that we look at, but today we're really to focus on the simple import. Now I'm going to hand you over to Callum. He's our tech guru, everything electronic or anything like that. He is the man to go to, and he will fix all your Salesforce problems. He's going to hit me afterwards.
Oh, I
for
don't
this
know.
one.
You
Gonna say,
set
did you
high
hear that, everybody?
expectations there.
Callum's the person to go to. Any problem, just go see Callum.
Immediately,
Jolie said so.
hide
You see,
myself
look.
on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Look, Emma Linney's like, I'm there.
There's going
Let's
to be
find
some
Callum a
asterisks
problem.
with that. I think my favorite hashtag was why admins drink, and I think I fully fall into that category many a time. But oh, thanks for the warm intro there, Jolie. I appreciate that you think so highly of me. I will just say a quick bit about myself for those that don't know me. My name's Callum. I've been working at ProvenWorks over 9 years now. I've probably done every role under the sun, just because I like to make myself annoying and get involved in absolutely everything. But the real benefits of that is that I've really seen how a business works, how a business use Salesforce, how a business can develop apps for Salesforce, and lots of other things associated with the Salesforce ecosystem, which I feel very fortunate to have experienced. So whilst I might not be able to fix everything, I do like to think that I'm well-rounded and can definitely help if anyone does have questions. As Jolie said, something that I think I'd really like to talk to you all about today is just one of our products, because we have seen some interesting use cases where people specifically in the nonprofit sector have seen some sort of real benefits by implementing the tool, because it really allows them to ultimately capture donations quicker and easier, and actually grant that sort of permission to other users in their org, so you're not so dependent on admins, because I'm sure that a lot of admins wish they had more time. Out of interest, how many people on this call deal with recurring donations in Salesforce? Is it a use case? I'm seeing a few hands. Nice. Yeah, awesome. And if you can keep your hand up if you find that the recurring donation process is relatively simple in Salesforce, or do you find that there are some complications with dealing with it? So. Cool. Okay, well, maybe I can provide a bit of information whilst kind of doing a little bit of a whiz of our tool. And then if there's any questions, you can obviously just ask us. Just to be clear, the stuff that I'm saying is from our premium version of SimpleImport. It is paid for, but I'm actually just kind of here to hopefully give some information just about recurring donations anyway. But there's obviously some synergy between our product and how that might be able to help your business capture recurring donations quicker. So what I'll do, I'll share my screen. and I want to show you my Salesforce org. And there's nothing too exciting in it at the moment. All I've got is no new contacts this week, or in perhaps non-profit terms, donors. Obviously, I would love some donors to keep my charity running. And the scenario that I like to sort of talk about in this is, you know, if you go to your local co-op or your Tesco Express and there's a stand with your charity out front and you've got some volunteers working there trying to capture some new donors, you know, we're really trying to work towards getting recurring donations these days, because, you know, recurring donations actually help us try and build that kind of annual recurring donation revenue for the business, say business charity, and Salesforce land in terminology. So the real thing we want to do is make it as easy as possible for people to capture that information. And I will say, for those that use the Nonprofit Success Pack, they've done a really good job of allowing you to capture those contacts and also make note of those recurring donations. Specifically, they have the contact object, which may be known as donors for many, and you also have the recurring donations object, which is also associated with contacts. And that's all fine and dandy, especially for us as admins. We're great, I can use Salesforce. For a lot of our users, perhaps they could be volunteers, perhaps they could be people just looking for a part-time job. They might not have that time to spend getting to know Salesforce. And hopefully that is something that everyone can appreciate, is that not everyone naturally gravitates towards these systems. Not everyone can understand an object structure, how they relate, and, you know, what happens if they make this change. And so that's why quite a lot of the time people do come to us and say, okay, a lot of our teams have their Microsoft Excel qualification from their college or their sixth form, and stuff like that. So importing tools provide a nice gateway to getting something like a spreadsheet file back into Salesforce. So actually, with that being said, I wanted to just show a very simple spreadsheet that I've been using as kind of a demo. And one thing that Jolie may have noted earlier is that SimpleImport's really cool in the fact that it does support lots of different file types, not just a CSV file type. So some of the nice things that I can do with that is add some macros in here. So if I wanted to distribute this to a team who just wanted something really quick and easy to use, I can just make some nice little buttons in my file and my template, and then they can just use these buttons and they can start filling in the information that they need. You know, to anyone, hopefully it'd be clear enough what they would need to fill in here. We don't really need to deal with the relationship between creating recurring donations and who's on it and stuff like that. It's just all in the spreadsheet file. Anyway, with that being said, I can just save this and I can just get ready to use this in my Salesforce org. So I'm just going to close this, and we're going to go to a Lightning app page that I created, and it's nice and simple. And all I've done here is really the SimpleImport part in this is this component that I've dragged on here, and I can just press the Get Started button. Now, SimpleImport has already been configured by myself. Full disclosure, I actually did this morning because I've been on holiday for the last 3 days. So hopefully it echoes how nice and quick it is to set up a new one from scratch. And all it's going to ask me for is to upload my file. And I'm just going to use my template file here, which was the file that we were just looking at. I'm going to press open, and I'm just going to let the tool do the rest. Realistically, at this point, you know, if someone knows how to upload a video to TikTok, then they can definitely upload an Excel file into SimpleImport and let the tool do the rest. What I was saying about an admin pre-configuring the tool or a power user pre-configuring the tool, all they would need to do is go into the SimpleImport app that is provided with the installation. That will be where you can define what objects you want to be able to connect the tool to. So for example, in this scenario, I wanted to import to contacts. I want to import into recurring donations, and then all of the items in my file, if I just bring that file back up. Everything in here is just going to be mapped as is. So realistically, your end user doesn't need to do anything other than just dragging the file in. Something that I do really like about this is also the ability for the component to be placed into a digital experience. The nice thing about a digital experience is if you do have sort of a volunteers portal or something like that, then they would be able to just go into their digital experience. They can log in as a partner user. You don't need to consume perhaps a full Salesforce license. all you can do is just give them kind of that digital experience access, and they'll be able to do the same process where all they need to do is just upload the file, and then the tool will do the rest and getting that data into Salesforce. So if you did then have a follow-up team or whatever you needed to deal with the recurring donations, then that's something that can all be done. So as this is just going through, it's just going to be importing. We should start seeing this go through very shortly. And that really is as simple as that. For an end user, there isn't much complication involved with this. And the real luxury is being able to use more complex file types so that you can add those restrictions. You can really keep them on rails, as Jolie said. Anyway, I rambled a lot there. I appreciate there's kind of a lot of words splurted over. But whilst this is kind of going in, does anyone have any questions on the use case specifically? Or does it resonate perhaps with a couple of people? No questions? That makes me happy. Oh, no, I've got a wave.
Question.
Oh,
Danny has
yeah,
a question. Nitsan has all the questions.
Well, just
go ahead.
one. Yeah, this looks too simple to be true, actually.
That
Because,
was the aim. I will say
you
that,
didn't show us anything about bad data or having to put the data in the right places and all of that. Is it really that simple?
Well, it's up to you, right? And so this is kind of where I think we have to put our admin's hat on a little bit and work out how we can utilize the tools to our best. The thing that I like to do to make sure that the data is probably in the best condition you can be initially is, put in some validations in the file. So for example, I've already got this limited to mirror the salutations that I have in Salesforce so that people can't just start adding in ones that I don't recognize in my org. Same with date formats as well and things like that. Again, this is stuff that would be stripped out for when you are using CSV files. Some of the other stuff on top is that because it is built on Salesforce and integrated with Salesforce, all of your validation rules are going to fire. Anything that you've configured in your org is still going to execute, whether it be triggers, you've got flows running, things like that. I've set this up so it just goes through, but if there were issues, it would basically just give you a warning here, and you'd just be able to download an error file, which would basically indicate each of the issues. What it'd look like on that error file is basically the file you put in, but there's a new column at the end, which will just indicate what would need to be changed. So what I would always recommend in those scenarios is if you've got a validation rule that's firing, review your validation rules and make sure they are clear and easy to understand as to what's happening. I think that's general good practice, obviously, in Salesforce. I think a lot of times I've definitely gone into some orgs where they might have a consultant implement a validation rule, and the validation rule might just say like, I don't know, missing information in one of the fields. And you think, okay, this is great, but what field have I got to go for? So just thinking about how people will interact with it. The tool does make sure that that information is fed back to the end user. And it's just a case of just saying, hey, if you see an issue here, make sure you just check this file, correct it. And the file is actually formatted in the way that it was put in. So it's just a case of them re-uploading that file that they edited on the way back out. So it keeps it at least streamlined in that sense that they can just deal with that.
So there's
Go
mapping
ahead.
involved because you're involving accounts, contacts, opportunities, payments, no mapping involved?
There is a mapping involved, but the nice thing is the end user doesn't have to worry about it. So this component that we have put on right here, if I just show you in the editor, the component is provided with a mapping ID. And so what it is for the user to do is to create a mapping. And that is something that comes in the SimpleImport tab. And if I just go here. So this tab is kind of designed for power users and system admins, developers as well. You really would give this to users that you generally trust higher than perhaps just your standard users. I probably wouldn't trust volunteers going in here unless you provide them the lockdown experience that you can do. And this is kind of a very similar experience to what you might find with data loaded solutions and data import wizard, where you can upload your file. And in fact, there's no better way to show it than just doing it. So if I use the same file that we just did, let me just close that one out. I open my file and I'll let this upload for a moment. And what this is going to do, it's going to, as you say, try and understand that file in a bit more detail. Because we support all these file types, we can also have multiple sheets available in here. and I've actually got a dedicated import sheet. I can select this sheet, and the tool will remember the sheets that we're working with as well, which kind of goes into this mapping that you're on about. If I go import Salesforce, and in our scenario, we did contact, and then we're also able to do a related object here. So we're going to do our recurring donations. And the term that we use is a mapping, and I've actually got this one saved. This is actually what's associated with that mapping ID that we saw placed into the component. So I'm just going to load that, and it's actually going to get all that information for me because I've already gone through this as an admin. One thing that I do like about this as well is if you are working with contacts or leads, we've also added an import to campaign button, which makes it super, super simple to just import to a campaign if you've got something running. But in this scenario, I haven't got that checked. We'll go through. We've got upserts happening in this scenario on the contact, so we can see that I'm actually working from personal email, first name and last name. Not always best practice to use these as matching conditions. This is very much just an example to be working with. And then also on the recurring donations, I want to insert recurring donations. When I press next, we can now see probably what you're referring to is how do I know what fields are going to what field within Salesforce? Could my users interfere with it? What's happening here is we've already got the column titles from row 1, and we're just mapping those to the Salesforce fields. One thing I've also added in here is what we call a constant value. So if you wanted to add a value to every record that you're importing, that would essentially be constant. The best example that I actually usually give with this is if you're doing something like products and price books and you want them all active immediately, you could just write true in here and map it to is active flag, and it's just going to do it for all of them. But in this scenario, I've just got them all opening, or I've got my open-ended status just to open, which just means my recurring donations are just going to be open and recurring from that sense. And then lastly, the last thing that you just have to do there is just press the save button or save as, and that'll let you save the mapping. If I do save as here, we can also store the sheet name. So if you are using a multiple sheet workbook, as long as it's got a name on the sheet that you're working with, you're able to just save that, and it will make sure that when they do upload that workbook, it's going to get the data from that sheet. And in the event that they do save it as a CSV, where it will just strip out that one sheet, it will just automatically assume that that's the sheet and give it a go. If it doesn't find the information, it will provide that information to the user as well and just say, hey, it doesn't look like the information's in this sheet, we uploaded the correct file, or it'll basically be along the lines of missing information, and it'll highlight what information is needed. So I appreciate it was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully that answered your question. Yeah. Cool.
I've got another question if no one, or if I'm allowed. Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it. I'm totally fine. Yeah. Work around. That's totally fine.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about my use case, and with the charity that I'm working for, they don't have recurring donations as such, not in volumes that they need something like this.
Yeah.
But every now and again they run like campaigns, and they have a list of donations in terms of and they use an extremely old version of NPSP, so I'm not even sure that there is recurring donations there. The question is, in terms of using SimpleImport and paying for it, is it possible to just do like a one-off or sporadic thing, or how does the pricing go with SimpleImport?
Generally, it is on an annual basis. I would probably just make sure that whatever the requirement is relayed to us, and we can get that checked. Actually, just the full disclosure, it's our agreements with Salesforce and what we can offer as an ISV partner in terms of our billing model. But probably more of a question for Jolie as well to answer in terms of pricing. But likely comes down to the use case, and we do try to make sure that we can, especially with charities and non-profits, work with the use cases so that actually there's value for money, and that it's not just going to sit there as an expense, because ultimately we don't want to be charging people unless there is value.
Okay.
Jolie, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that as well.
No, that's absolutely right. It's specifically for recurring imports. If it's if it's a one-off import, not usually something we'd look at really. With the free version of the tool, you've got limited access to what objects we can import into. I think you can import into It's normally in accounts, contacts, leads, campaigns and contracts.
Okay, but no opportunities and payments.
I'm not sure. Can we do?
Wouldn't be
Opportunities.
payments
Wouldn't be
as a
payments,
custom
definitely not.
object.
No.
But, yeah.
But you're limited to 5 or 6 different objects, standard objects, but definitely not payments. I know of. So.
Okay.
With that, those sorts of scenarios are definitely worth just checking out. And there is obviously free trials, and it is perpetual in a sandbox as well. And we like to be flexible, because ultimately I want to make sure that anyone that does have interest in the tool can test it and actually be like, okay, this meets my needs. Because ultimately, if it doesn't, I don't want you to have a bill for a year and not use it. So definitely give it a go, see if it meets the needs. And actually, surprisingly, something that I found more often is people find it for one use case and then another and then another and then another, because it is just a tool that is, I call it horizontal, which Salesforce tell me off for because they like vertical products, but it is very horizontal in that it can just apply to anything. But you know, it's easier to tell the story with a specific use case, such as recurring donations.
Okay, well, I'll keep it in mind, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks for the question.
Brilliant question. Yvonne's put one in the chat for you, Callum.
Ooh.
It says, what are the top advantages of the simple import tool over the MPSP importer?
Oh, good question. So the MPSP importer, I have had generally just a number of issues of divvying it out to team members. Now, don't hold me to this, but I don't think it can be handed to just standard users. I believe they need elevated permissions. Am I incorrect in saying that? Okay, so simple import works in a sense of utilizing the user's permissions. So whatever CRUD and FLS that I've provided to my users, it's going to be restricted to that. So I've spent all these years creating these profiles, creating my permission sets. The last thing I need to be doing is starting to think, okay, well, I want them to have access to this tool. Now I need to start granting them, modify all data temporarily or put them on a permission set for a moment. Don't get me wrong, I love that you can have permission sets for like a time frame, but if you can avoid that, I think it's always best. With simple import utilizing the CRUD and FLS model, you just don't really have to think about that at all. If they did try to import to something, so perhaps you created a component and your mapping went to an object where they didn't have access to the fields, it's going to prevent them and it's going to tell them, and it's going to tell them specifically what field they don't have access to. And at that point, it would just prompt them to speak to yourselves as an admin to either correct their permissions. So I would say it's probably the time that we've spent to make sure that it does reflect the CRUD and FLS Salesforce security model, basically, and so that permissions don't need to be elevated. Again, this is really echoed when you're working with like partner users and working from like sort of a digital experience. And actually, I think if there was a real USP on it, it's probably the digital experiences, because I think that's probably where the most exciting things are, or at least I kind of nerd out about the partner ports of digital experiences, but maybe that's a bit more about me. Does that help answer that question?
It does, thanks.
I would have thought also the fact that you set them up with the different templates and they're just set up and there and they can't deviate has to be quite a nice.
Yeah.
Especially
exactly
if you've got an org, if you're an admin, and I've had users like this where they have to do a certain thing as part of their job, but they just can't help but fiddle with stuff.
Yeah.
I just can't help but
Basically
like, oh,
me.
well, I thought it was in the right format, or, oh, well, I thought that, I just feel that it's so you can put it so much in a box.
Yeah.
And then
and that's actually something that we've iterated on stuff all over the years on this. Is once upon a time it was just a user could get access to it and they could do what they wanted, and then we locked it down so only they could use mappings that you had created, but an admin could use it as they needed. Then we added in specific object locking down, so you can say to users, despite you having your CRUD and FLS for all of these objects, we actually only want you to use this tool for contacts or opportunities and things like that. So you can sort of grow on top of your already existing permissions and kind of extend it that way as well, which I think is quite nice. And ultimately, it kind of just grew from customer requests as well, which is really nice because I think it's an organic way that a product gains features that are actually useful and are used in the real world. And there is just lots of different options for getting that data in.
It's one of the challenges with non-profit is that you're dealing with often so many volunteers and untrained people, and this just literally sticks them on the rails, and they can't move, they can't deviate from doing the imports this way. So you've got to behave.
Absolutely.
Debbie, have you raised your
Debbie's
hand?
got a question.
Yeah, hi. It was I might have missed it, so apologies if I did, but for matching records, can you like with the import, you can use the external ID field. So can you still do that? So
yes. So actually, let me see if I can do another very quick example. Now, this was just something I mocked up and I wasn't planning to demonstrate, but actually might be a good example. So I have in very Trailhead inspired Major Donor Inc. And they have an opportunity with my charity about funding for new equipment. And we have this component here on here. And the idea of this component being placed on this record is actually the information that I'd want to import is going to be associated directly with this record. So I could have an opportunity and I want to associate all my future payments. And I'll show you the kind of use case first, just to give context, and then I'll kind of explain how that's done with the external IDs, if that's okay. So I'll just show you this very simple file. I'll just get this up. So there's really nothing complicated in this example. We've got scheduled date, we've got a payment amount, and we basically see that they haven't paid on these schedules yet. But most importantly, that I will eventually get to, is that there isn't a record ID associated in this file at all. So for a lot of other tools at the moment, we're probably thinking, how's this information going to be associated with this opportunity that I'm looking at? So in our product, we're going to open this up. Again, I've already got a mapping done, and it does already kind of use the external ID example that you were on about there, Debbie. So I'll go and explain that shortly. I'm just going to choose my file. I'm going to open that. I'm going to let that go. Now, what it's actually done in this scenario is it is capturing the exact record ID, which isn't that exciting. It's not necessarily an external ID in that scenario. But what we can also support is the name field and any other field that you have configured as external ID. There are some also additional edge cases on top of that, such as a SKU on the product object as well. And I'll actually show you that in a mapping in a moment. But in short, as long as a field is configured as an external ID or on the metadata, I believe they call it like ID lookup, if we're getting slightly technical. If we just press down on there as well, we can see all those payments have been imported directly to this opportunity. And then if we just go back to SimpleImport tab to just show you that, I appreciate I'm going 100 miles an hour as I thought this would be nice and quick within 35 minutes, but I do appreciate that I waffled by a bit. I'm so sorry. So we'll just get this up here. And we are just going to upload this file just to give you this example. And I'll let that upload. And I'll import. And so for this example, we were going to do, I'm trying to think what the object's called. Let's go op payment, I believe. Yeah. So in this example, we do want to associate it with an opportunity. And by that association, we ideally need either the record ID or an external ID field, as you have mentioned, Debbie. So as we move forward, because it's actually going to be a fresh op payment record each time, I'm going to do insert at this stage. However, on this stage here, I can actually start referencing an external ID. So as soon as there is an ID field reference, so like a lookup field or a master detail relationship field, you can actually see all of the options that that field has that you can actually basically have as an accepted value. So in this scenario, I can see that I've got elevate recurring ID as marked as an external ID that I could use for my opportunity. I can also use the opportunity name. So it really gives you that options. In the event that there is a duplicate, so perhaps you have configured an external ID field, but you haven't made it unique, then it will try and match it against an existing value. But if there are duplicates, it would actually say warning that there are multiple records that do match this. So in short, yes, external IDs are supported. few edge cases to obviously bear in mind, such as, you know, if there are, if unique is not checked, but it is an external ID, then that sort of thing will be fed back to the end user. So I appreciate there was a bit of a convoluted way of explaining yes to the question, but sometimes visuals sit a lot easier. But yes, in the red is basically the external ID values that are accepted. And then to get really cherry on top, the way that those payments were associated with that existing opportunity was because of this record ID tag, as we call it. If you're familiar with how flows work and how you can pass record IDs into flows, we stole it from them, but it was really awesome functionality, and we just wanted to sort of emulate that experience. And actually, I'd also say that's also a really awesome feature that I think competes with, well, I don't think I've seen any other thing in the market that does it. So that's really cool. Any questions on that? No? Awesome. Then I think I'm probably done from a demo point of view. 100 miles an hour I appreciate, but if there are questions, I mean, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Always love to just speak to people and honestly just nerd out a little bit. So if there are questions in general, do hit me up. Obviously, I know Emma very kindly mentioned that we do have a couple of products. We do. One of our other products is Address Tools. I will hand over to Jolie if Jolie's got any notes on that. But what I will say is, because I did a terrible job of demoing it, because I came up with this awesome example in my file earlier that I did show. If we're thinking that we've got volunteers, we've got helpers helping out, capturing data, we've got all of these different formats captured for essentially the United Kingdom. And I do have Address Tools running. And when I did use SimpleImport, all of those were standardized using Address Tools on the way in. So again, there's a nice little full toolkit of that. Anyway, I'll stop demoing, I'll stop rambling, and then Jolie, if there's anything from your side and any other questions, please do.
Cool. Any questions at the moment?
Wow, amazing. That was really good, guys. So I know, as Jolie and Callum have already said, you can download into a sandbox. Jolie and Callum are also super approachable, as you can tell. So if you want to talk to them more, you want to talk to them about your specific use case, I know they will be happy to chat with you. And as they say, I think the call that we had, well, we had to have more than one because we just had that much fun on the first call. We had to have a follow-up.
We got quite excited, didn't we?
We got quite excited, and we did do lots of nerding out, and we did lots of me and Callum being really nerdy with, and Jolie being like, "That's really cool." So yeah, we had loads of fun. So please do, you know, touch base with them. Yeah, give it a try and see what you think.
Give it a whirl. They're all available on the App Exchange. So you can download free trials of everything anyway. So download it, play with it, see how you like it. Any questions, just shout. Literally, we're always only a phone call away, an email away, whatever. So always willing to talk. How much time have we got left?
Well, you're actually over time, but
Oh.
I blame Jolie's intro for being so long.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Sure. But no, the team, they do have great address management tools and phone tools as well. So if anybody wants to see a demo of those, let them know. I'm sure they're more than happy to set something up.
Yeah. So if anyone wants my email address, it's jcooper@ProvenWorks.com.
And you can find both Jolie and Callum on LinkedIn, because I did. So they're not like hidden, and you have to be like, is it definitely them? You can tell. Oh, bless you, Callum. So I'm gonna hand over, if that's okay, to Mark Jones, who's wearing some amusing flow t-shirt, because I can tell by the play button at the top it looks like a flow play. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, and he's going to chat to us a bit about Dreamforce, which now seems forever ago. But equally, a few people said to me, "Oh, you seem to do loads over Dreamforce," and I'm like, "No, I just watched a couple of sessions, and I mean, I think I watched two. I did. I watched two. I watched True to the Core, and I watched the non-profit keynote. That was it. I didn't even, I'm not gonna lie, didn't even watch release readiness. I've still got that to do, even though I'm going to talk about releases. So yeah, so I'm hoping Mark can fill us in. Over to you, Mark.
Cool. Well, thanks, Emma. Let me just pop up my screen. I'll get that sharing because I do have some slides for this session. Just my screen a little bit so I can see. So we've got some highlights and takeaways from Dreamforce, and like a bunch of everybody, I'm guessing most people, if not everybody on this call, I didn't go to Dreamforce in person this year, and I watched it online on Salesforce+, or should I say, I watched a good chunk of it online. I haven't watched everything online because there is a ton of stuff about that's just basically just marketing spiel, which I've not really been kind of been putting off watching. But what you'll see towards the end of this, there was a QR code with a list of resources with kind of like the sessions I'm going to particularly mention in this session here. We've got about 20 minutes, but I'm going to try and keep it on time for what we've got. So if there's any questions, feel free to raise hand or comment, and I will do what I can to answer. But just so you know, because some of this is coming out of Keynote stuff, chances are I probably won't have all of the answer for you, because Salesforce have a real known history at Keynotes of not giving you all of the information that you want to know on what they announce, so they can kind of make it very much appealing. So I'm going to skip a little bit about myself, so you can know, because you might know me. If not, feel free to find me online. I'm on LinkedIn, on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, and the Trailblazer community, so you can find me there. So I've got 5 particular sets of highlights I want to mention, and we'll go over these relatively briefly, and I'll give you what information is available right now that I have found on these, based on these stuff. And this first one comes from the main keynote on there. So the main keynote every year is delivered by Mark Benioff and a bunch of other people. And in all honesty, sometimes you kind of watch it, it's about an hour and a half, and you get maybe about 10 minutes worth of well, 10 minutes might be a bit of exaggeration, maybe 30 minutes worth of stuff that's kind of really interesting coming out of it, that applies to those of us who use the Salesforce platform on a daily basis. Most of it is basically kind of selling what Salesforce are doing and kind of trying to making Salesforce look good, rather than talking about enhancements for a lot of it. This year is massively focused on AI, and part of the big push around AI is getting Data Cloud into the hands of companies that are using it. And part of what they are doing with that is that they are launching the ability to get access to a free version of Data Cloud, which if you heard of Genie last year, Data Cloud is basically that. Still working through exactly what it is. I don't think Salesforce have fully kind of given us all of the information to be able to definitively say, here's what Data Cloud is for that. But the general concept is that it's a way to kind of bring all of your data together across all of your different clouds and manage it there. So if you've got stuff in, say, Tableau, Marketing Cloud, Pardot, Slack, it's a Data Cloud's the idea for it is that basically be where you can essentially govern all of that data together, and it also will leverage some of these new AI functionalities that Salesforce are pushing. Part of that is they're going to give you free access to Data Cloud if you have used an enterprise or limited edition org for that. Not sure how many of us on this call that would kind of eliminate from that, with us being non-profit clients predominantly. But if you do happen to have an enterprise org or an unlimited org, you can get free Data Cloud license for up to 10,000 profiles, and you also can get 2 Tableau Creator licenses. Tableau Creator would be for the main Tableau program, not necessarily what we have known as Tableau CRM, or what is now known as Analytics Cloud. I think that's what they're calling it. I might be wrong on that. Salesforce change the names for these products every couple of years and things, but I think it's Analytics Cloud currently.
Just to jump in there, Mark, I've done a bit more digging on this, because you know how they've put free data cloud and Tableau. Well, everybody got very excited and thought that meant we got these 2 Tableau licenses. It would appear you get the Tableau licenses if you take the free data cloud.
Yes.
And there also appears to be some restriction about what they do. So there's still quite a few people doing a lot of digging. So for example, can I do free data cloud, even though I have absolutely no use for data cloud, to give me these licenses? And then what can these licenses do?
Yes.
Now, I'm attending Nonprofit Dreaming next month in Chicago, as is Mark. So I think Mark and I can, at that point, we're going to talk to an awful lot of nonprofit people and see if people have figured out if there's any benefit in this.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit like this is one of, and I shouldn't say this when we're being recorded, but I feel a little bit like this is Salesforce doing one of those, wow, look what you can get for free. Isn't it amazing? And actually, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And you're only going to really want to use data cloud if you're actually connecting up other systems. Now, if you've got a need to connect up other systems, great, or multiple Salesforce orgs, great. How many of us are doing this in the smaller non-profit space, really?
Probably very few, but there is potential benefits that you could get from having like access to Tableau creator licenses, but it's still a little bit unknown as to how that exactly is going to work, because what Salesforce haven't done in typical Dreamforce fashion is fully explained what the limitations are around the Tableau creator licenses. I think there's more information out there about the data cloud stuff, surprisingly, than there is about the Tableau licenses.
And they all appear to be tied together. When you start reading the data cloud stuff, then it tells you about Tableau. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
like, can you do one without the other? Like, it's so unclear, as usual.
Exactly. And if I was putting my non-profit hat on, I would probably be more interested in the Tableau licenses, because Tableau is a really good product, than I would be about the data cloud stuff. But again, we'll see how things come out. But that is a big one, and Salesforce are massively pushing that, so it is a one to be aware of at the very least. But as I say, in typical Salesforce and Dreamforce fashion, we don't have enough information as of yet to know exactly what the implications are of this fully. But as Emma mentioned, it does appear that you would to get the free Tableau creator licenses, you have to opt in for the data cloud deal that they have. Okay, so that's the first highlight. The second one is around functionalities coming from to non-profit cloud. Now, the next highlights 2 and 3 are essentially part of the same thing, but I've split them out because they are different bits of functionality, essentially. So in the non-profit keynote, if you haven't seen that one yet, it was mentioned, a couple of things were mentioned that were particularly important. One, the highlights 2 and 3, which are about the non-profit cloud functionality, has mentioned that in October, we're going to be getting fundraising functionality and outcomes management functionality for non-profit cloud. So if you happen to be in the process of migrating to the new non-profit cloud that Salesforce launched earlier this year, those elements of functionality are coming in the next like 4 to 6 weeks, realistically, because they are due to come in October. So they should be here anytime from within the next 4 or 5 weeks, realistically. So that's going to be interesting. And the outcome management stuff from what they demoed, again, this is just from what they demoed, looks like it might work potentially quite well depending on your setup. So there is the ability to kind of obviously to create programs in the case where you would have done with program management module, and you'll be also able to log outcomes relating to the programs. That's part of that. I haven't actually had chance to try it out yet myself. So I don't know what it's like in demo environments as such. But those are 2 big ones for us in the non-profit sector, that those bits of functionality coming, because fundraising was certainly a bit of a big gap when the non-profit cloud first launched, because I personally don't know too many non-profits who don't use Salesforce in some capacity for fundraising. Most of the people that I have known over the years have used it in that capacity. So these two bits are potentially important for you to know, and those are kind of the highlights I would think of. The other one I don't have on this slide because I didn't want to do too much AI talk from that. It was confirmed that AI functionality for the new nonprofit cloud was targeted for February next year in the nonprofit keynote. So if you're interested in the AI side of things and how that's going to look for the nonprofit cloud particularly, I would be on the lookout to see that more stuff coming out about that over the next 6 or so months, because I'd say it's targeted for February launch. I'm going to go on to my fourth highlight and just mention kind of probably my favorite session at Dreamforce and Trailblazer DX every single year, which is True to the Core. And if you want to know kind of what True to the Core essentially is, if you haven't seen it before, it's essentially you basically put a bunch of higher ups from Salesforce and a bunch of product managers in a room, and you stick an audience of people who use Salesforce day in and day out, and you basically let admins, developers, BAs, people who use the product at a higher level, basically grill Salesforce and ask, why have we not got this feature, or why is it taking so long to release this update that you said was going to come 5 years ago? It's that kind of thing. For me, it's a real highlight because we've actually seen some really good stuff come out of it over the last few years. I remember particularly 2 years ago, where I submitted a question online for it about the announcement around Flow and the Flow roadmap, because it was announced at a Release Readiness Live that Workflows and Process Builder were being retired and that they were going to be pushing Flow instead. But at that time, they said nothing about when this was going to happen, and knowing the impact it would have on thousands of companies and thousands of admins, I pushed the question going, well, can you give us a roadmap, because we need to know when. So we got that out of True to the Core a couple of years ago. At True to the Core Trailblazer DX, it was pushed around getting custom error messages for Flow out, and that is coming out in this very release. I don't know if I've jumped the gun on something Emma might have on her slides, but that was something that came out True to the Core. As was the custom address fields that we got in last year's summer release, I believe. So True to the Core does have some value for us as Salesforce professionals, because we are able to kind of really push Salesforce to kind of actually bring out functionality that is very much in demand. And it's one of those sessions where I can't necessarily just say there was just one standout thing from it. So my recommendation would be, it's just under an hour long. So my recommendation is go watch it and have a watch and see what comes out that would interest you. Some of the things that were big highlights for me within that session was the comments around dynamic forms. They are planning over the next couple of releases to bring dynamic forms to they said thousands, over 1,000 objects in Salesforce. That would be a lot of standard objects because they've already got custom objects. So they plan to bring to over 1,000 objects. How many of them will affect us in the nonprofit space remains to be seen. However, it was noted that campaigns and campaign members for the foreseeable future are not two of them, which is a real disappointment. But they did mention in True to the Core that was specifically because of the engine that campaigns and campaign members are built on, and how different that functionality is to the vast majority of standard objects in Salesforce. They do plan to bring it to campaigns. They did mention that at True to the Core, but according to them, they need more time to actually get it to work with the core functionality that campaigns has. So it is in their vision to do it for campaigns, but it's not going to be ready for a while yet, because of the complexity of that particular object. They also mentioned enhancements to list views. In fact, it is planned in migration of list views from one version of list views to a completely new version of list views sometime in the next 12 months. They mentioned they were anticipating probably the summer release, but they did not confirm that. And they have mentioned that hinted at some functionality that might be coming to it. In particular, the question that raised that point around it was around things like nested sorting and list views. So we can expect to see some functionality that we don't have in list views currently to come to that within the next 12 months, most likely. Other things they mentioned was setup enhancements and reporting enhancements. There's a lot of work going on about making setup more user-friendly. So that, for example, you don't have to do like 7 clicks or something to get to one particular thing. So I would recommend really watching True to the Core. As I say, might be a little bit biased because I spend so much time in the back end of Salesforce as part of my job, but True to the Core is probably my favorite session from Dreamforce. So I thought that was worth sticking in there. And the last one I've got, which is a little bonus one, which is something you're not going to be able to find on Salesforce+ because it was not from a recorded session, but there is a bunch of flow roadmap ideas that were pushed out in a roadmap session. And I have seen these getting shared on LinkedIn through a post from somebody who was in attendance, a guy called Stephen Churchy, you might have seen on LinkedIn. So there's a load of stuff that Salesforce have mentioned around particularly Flow, and I'm putting this in there because I'm very much biased towards Flow, hence why I'm wearing a Flow t-shirt. That was not planned, by the way, but just put in there that some of the updates that were highlighted for coming was the ability to see where email alerts we use in the Flow would be highlighted. This would be similar to the where was used functionality that we already have. That one's a particular strong one, I think, for non-profits, because most of non-profits that I know use email alerts a lot. And there's also the ability, the added idea for what I've termed as add another functionality in ScreenFlow. So the idea for that would be if you use a ScreenFlow to basically submit a form and like essentially whether that's to fill in details to create a record, they would the ability to essentially add a repeater section similar to what we have in the likes of like JotForm, Form Assembly. I think has a repeater section as well. Although someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the idea would be you create a section with some input components on there. And then have a button that will say essentially, add another or something like that, and you then be able to do another set of inputs from that section that gets copied over. Autosave has also been mentioned as coming to Flow. That has been targeted for next year at some point, from what I understand. And that will allow you to basically create your flow and essentially enable an autosave functionality. I'm not sure how that will work in terms of versioning and how that would affect if you're working in, say, how that was going to work necessarily. But that could be a potential benefit as well. They've also mentioned, again, a lot of this is, you can probably see, is for ScreenFlows. They've also mentioned about having reactive buttons for ScreenFlows in there as well. Again, I'm not sure how that's going to fully work, but that was something that was pitched, which is going to be quite interesting with the direction that ScreenFlows is going with reactivity at the moment. And then the final two I've got is Salesforce. They've mentioned that they would like to create some kind of Lightning app to help you organize your flows. This will probably include some like folders for that, better ways of managing the list views for flows inside of that. But that's something that is really interesting to me, and I'd like to see where that goes. And then the final one, which I think is probably would probably be quite an underrated one, is that for ScreenFlows, they have pitched the idea of adding a button that you can add into a ScreenFlow flow that you can link to an auto launch flow that you can essentially just click on that button and it would run an auto launch flow in the background whilst you're in that ScreenFlow. So those are some of the ones that's coming out from the Flow roadmap session highlights, which I thought were really, really interesting. And that's the highlights for me. I think I'm just about at time. So I'm going to just mention very quickly. There is a QR code on the screen there. If you don't grab that in time, I will put in the link to the form inside of the chat. At the moment, it might not work because I don't know if I've set the security settings right, but I'll put the link in the chat as well, and I'll quickly update that while Emma's doing her highlights session. And with that in mind, just want to say a big thank you, and just see if there's any questions before I wrap up and pass over to Emma.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark.
That QR code does not indeed work, so if you can share, that'd be awesome.
Yes, I will do. Yes, because
and amusingly, so Yvonne has commented that in release readiness, Cheryl Feldman talks about having a long-term plan to make the setup much more user-friendly. If you want to watch True to the Core and watch Andrew Russo get really cross because Cheryl Feldman's being asked to look after yet another area of Salesforce, go for it. I will also say, I think out of all the True to the Cores I have seen, this True to the Core was probably the least exciting. I don't know if Mark would agree with this, but I think there was few people taking the opportunity to just kind of give feedback and maybe just have a bit of a moan. And it was actually, they made a point of pointing out that, you know, Park Harris actually pointed out you're meant to be here to be asking for new features and stuff like that. So we'll see. So if you watch it and you think, well, it wasn't exciting as I expected, maybe give it another shot, because there'll be one at TDX and that'll also be recorded.
Yeah, it was. I didn't mention in the slides either, but one of the things I did mention is there are plans to enhance how True to the Core actually works and performs, because they have mentioned they are very much aware that the current format isn't entirely working, so they are looking at ways to actually allow customers more access to kind of the PMs and to basically have vents and that kind of stuff. So that should hopefully be coming down the pipeline at some point.
Brilliant. They only promised us that at TDX as well earlier this year. So
Yeah.
anyway, obvious safe harbors all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and talk about the winter release. Haven't forgot to press the present button. There's a reason I'm going to hover here for a minute, because it's just going to make it easier, because I want to actually open another browser tab. So winter release highlights. You've probably seen this sort of thing before. This comes out like a slide from Salesforce as to where we're at for the key dates, and I just really like it. I was starting to write a list and I was like, why bother when we've got this? So I just stole it. So in here you'll see, you know, release period lasts, you know, an awfully long time. It's about 6 or 7 weeks. So there was the pre-release org sign up right back. These are US dates, so right back on the 10th of August when we were all enjoying our summer break, right? Release notes then came out, sandbox preview started, the release site finally popped up. There's then the release module on Trailhead. Talk about that more in a minute. Even more stuff with decks. Then we had release weekends. So there was a release weekend right back on the 1st of September, but generally no, say, normal clients end up on that release weekend. The big release weekends are the weekend of the 6th and the weekend of the 13th. Depending where your server is based, you know, it's normally in the middle of the night. However, if you're in the UK and you're based on a US server, that's not always the case, but normally happens in the middle of the night. And release readiness live started at Dreamforce. So it's the one time it moves. It's normally on a Friday night, but the admin preview is anyway. But this time it was done at actually during Dreamforce. So I will link to that as well, but that is available on catch up. Yvonne has already watched it. So, you know, she can always tell us what happened. I'll be honest, haven't yet picked it up. Lots of blog articles out there and stuff, and that's actually how I put together all of this. So, going to go through some of my highlights. First thing I want to talk about is migration to Hyperforce. Now, interestingly, it's kind of not part of the winter release, but it's just happening at the moment. So if you are on an org that's due to go to Hyperforce, which is effectively kind of a different setup as to where all your stuff is stored. Don't get too hung up on it. Go read the Hyperforce stuff. It tells you a lot more eloquently than I can. It's all to do with security and all of this. But you will get an email and it will tell you your org is going to be going to Hyperforce, and you get like an alert, and then you get another alert. Don't ignore them. Go look in settings, and there's a Hyperforce assistant. So if you literally go into your setup, Hyperforce, there's an assistant. Go through it. There are 6 things. Thing at the very bottom is Marketing Cloud. It'll appear regardless. That one you can tick off if you don't have Marketing Cloud. Further up, you will have things like checking there's no hard-coded IDs in your org. You can run a thing and it will check. Just to let you know, though, really weirdly, you run it, doesn't save it to say it's been done. So just run it, wait, see it's been updated, then move on. And then there's another one that checks for something else. Then there's a whole thing about email deliverability. Because this didn't catch out Yvonne Small and her organisation, who said it'd be absolutely fine. But luckily, when Yvonne had an issue on the Monday morning, she went, we moved to Hyperforce over the weekend. It's going to be that. And everybody in IT told her that was not going to be the case. But it was. So I would say, you know, there's so much you can do. You'll see there's some links in there about stuff to do with IT, to do with whitelisting IP addresses, to do with, you know, just send, a lot of it is IT related. So send the links to your IT teams, ask them to read through them, and at least, let's say, cover yourselves for the fact that I did ask IT to check all of this in terms of, because it's a lot of it, because they're moving where your org is, it's to do with IP ranges and that sort of thing. So if you have got IP ranges that need sorting, and they need to help you with that. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on that. But now let's get into our actual release. So reactive screen components. So they have put a lot of work into reactive screen components. I'm not going to turn into Mark and be quite as excited about Flow, but there's a reason I left this up. They've done a really nice job of this article. It's a nice blog article, which I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit more, actually. What I really like about this is, look, I can't explain this. Like, I can just show you. I don't need my own presentation. So literally, there are things that this reactive screens can do that, you know, I like this one. So when somebody clicks the return reason of don't want/need, it'll refund to original payment. If I tick on defective, it will tick store credit. Like, how cool is that? Not non-profit related, but you know, you get the gist. It's also, I'm going to scroll down, you see it's quite a long article. Like this one, look at this. So if I pick the different options, get a different picture, get a different price, get a different description. There's even more, but this one's really cool. You have completed a certain % of the form. So forgive me for not doing some snazzy demo, but I was like, wow, I can just use this article. So what I would say is go check this out. You know what? We haven't got time to all be building new screen flows, but know that they're here and know that there's things that you know, can do, because some of it is really, 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 really cool. Okay. Really good article there by Adam White. Now we can actually throw ourselves into presentation mode. So other things that came out, custom error messages in record triggered flows. So that's quite nice. So you can actually get an error message out of a record triggered flow now. There are more wait elements in flow. There's like a list of them. So now pause is called wait. Definitely something to look at, because there are some different options in there. So, you know, just be aware that they're there. You may not need them, but equally, if you're trying to solve a certain use case, that might be helpful. There's also filters on the Flow Trigger Explorer. So the Flow Trigger Explorer, where you can put your flows in order as to when they fire, there's actually some really nice filtering on there now. So rather than having to just like, oh, can't look at all of these because I've got quite a lot, you can filter them down and get a much better view. I quite like that one. There's mass quick actions on related lists. So you can actually now set a quick action on a related list, limited to do create and update. That's pretty cool because then a user directly from the related list can create or they can update records. That's quite nice. I'd love somebody to like do a real life example for us and demo it. So anyone wants to offer that'd be pretty cool. There's also dynamic forms on, and this is how Salesforce worded it, not me trying to be overly technical, but they called it Lightning Web Component Enabled Standard Objects. So I think this was the way of telling everybody it's on all standard objects, but it's not on some. Bit like Mark mentioned, not on some. That includes campaigns, products, tasks. And I think the way they've really covered themselves is there's going to be a couple of other randoms that probably are very product specific. So, you know, we've got dynamic forms on those now. So generally, dynamic forms is now available everywhere. If you've not played with dynamic forms yet, go for it. One of the big shout outs really was that it's available on mobile. If you use mobile, fantastic. You know, actually having those dynamic forms that you've created, you know, your page layouts now looking snazzy, having it on mobile is great. Something that I think is amazing and I was so excited to see was you can transfer ownership of a Lightning dashboard. Now, for anybody who has had somebody with a load of really kick-ass dashboards who then leaves, you would know that this is really cool because you can literally now transfer ownership of that dashboard to somebody else, which is really nice. It means, you know, you should no longer get that just this person has left, which is what it tells you. It says like this user has been deactivated. So you should now be able to transfer them to somebody else, which is great. No longer will their hard work go missing. Other thing that's rocked up, and this, funny, I took this off another blog article who pointed out that Analytics Home, you know, reports and dashboards, was kind of meant to appear in the summer, and kind of has, but kind of hasn't. And it appears that some stuff's maybe come out mid-release. Not really sure. The main reason I'm calling it out is I've had a couple of things in an org where I've been in the middle of a report and I've saved something to do with the report, and then it's thrown me into the analytics tab. Don't be overly shocked if that happens. I don't know whether they're then going to try and make us all move there and be like, don't use something called reports and dashboards, use analytics. I don't know. I believe it's got also some link through to Tableau, but just know that it's there. So if you're in the middle of doing a report and you suddenly end up in analytics, don't be shocked. It's basically my call out there. Also now you can automate user access with improved user access policies, which initially sounded like really complicated, but I realized when you dug into it, it's actually not so much. So you can actually set up certain, I believe it's profiles, to have certain permission sets or permission set groups, and that there is a limit on numbers, but it didn't sound too harsh. So that could be quite nice, particularly so then for setting up new users. It's simpler to set up a new user because a lot of that base level is already allocated. So that's something definitely to take a look at as an admin. See if you can simplify that process. Equally, might not be worth the effort if you're only setting up the odd user a year. You know, you might not want to rush out doing that, but if you've got a lot of users to handle, might be worth looking at. Something I really like, and I've put all of these together, is permission sets. Everything to do with permission sets and permission set groups and all of that. So permission sets and permission set groups are the way forward. If you missed that kind of announcement, let's say, we're moving away from permissions being on profiles, and it means that your orgs are all going to need some work because by 2026 we've got to all move. But what has happened in this release is kind of getting to a point where we can properly look at what we've got. So one thing is you can look at a permission set group and actually see how many permission sets are in it. So that's quite nice. We can do a report on custom permission sets and permission set group assignments and actually see who they're allocated to. You know, this is big stuff, really, basics. We can view what is enabled in a permission set. Absolutely love this. Yvonne will tell you that I rang her up with just like, stop what you're doing, you need to go look at this right now. She was actually in a meeting, but it was basically like, oh my god, this is incredible, because you can go look at a permission set, scroll down, and it will tell you what they've got access to. So like, wow. And you can also see API names and field permissions in a permission set, which again is super helpful. So, and field level security for permission set groups. When you now create a new field, it will ask you if you've turned it on. I believe you can toggle this on and off. So don't be too freaked out by this, but you can actually turn it on. So if you've got permission set groups and you permission sets, and when you set up your new field, you can say, please put this field in this permission set, you know, and give access in that permission set, as opposed to what we were having to do before, which was like, if you were starting to follow this model, you're like, oh, I shouldn't put it in any profiles, might put it in system admin. Most people are going that way. Put it in my system admin, but now I've got to go off, find my permission set, and then change my permission sets and put my fields into them. So fiddly. This is the other way around. So, you know, new opportunity field, I want to give read access on, you know, to this permission set, edit access to this permission set. It's great. And then finally, Mark talked a little bit about non-profit cloud, and the stuff that Mark talked about is actually coming out in the release. They are following the release periods. So there is going to be outcome management, grant making, and an MVP for fundraising in the winter release. So I've got a little QR code. Hopefully mine works. Bit panic now. But what I've done here is this will take you to the Learn More Winter 24 for Admins Trailhead. And within there are links to the release highlights for admins and users, which I really like. I think this is really cool. The Winter 24 release highlights and the Winter 24 release notes. So that's the release notes. That's the Trailhead badge, sorry, the release highlights. And then this release highlights for admin and users. Now, if I click on that, I really like this. I think this is great. They've actually written a really nice roundup of features. They've given nice pictures and nice links. So actually, if you just want a general overview, what's in there, go take a look at that. And it's all in. This is the Learn More link that the QR code goes to. Also takes you to the release readiness video and other things in there as well. If you've not done the Salesforce release readiness strategies badge, it's probably worth one as well. And it is actually also, if you complete the whole thing, if you follow it and complete the whole thing, it's actually a quest with Salesforce. So you'll get a little badge if you do the whole thing on your profile. Whoop. And you might win something. I once did. I think Yvonne once did, right? There you go. Look, Yvonne did, and I'm sure Mark's won something on one of these as well. So you know, definitely people do win. I was always a bit skeptical, you know, but anyway.
Can I say something about the blog that you just
this one
had on there? Yes. So, as an admin for an end user, I love the fact that if on this one actually it's right at the bottom, and it used to kind of be at the top. It splits out admin highlights and user highlights. So right at the bottom in this section is here's what your users need to know. So being the conscientious admin that I am, I pretty much just copy and paste these elements out and then translate the language into something that is useful for my users, and then pop that in an email and send it around to people who it's going to be applicable for. So things like, I think in the last one we had like a report update where you could see a preview, or you know, like this color is changing on this thing, or this icon is changing, so people don't get the shock of their lives. So yeah, it splits it out into admins and then features for users, which I really, really love.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, super helpful. Okay. Anyone got any questions that I probably can't answer? But I mean, there's lots there. Go read. But just be aware, there's lots going on. Some stuff more exciting than others.